Would it be easier to take 30 NBA players and have them make a roster in the NFL, or easier to take 30 NFL players and have them make a roster in the NBA? Let's boil it down. Easier to find 5 tight ends in the NBA or 5 NBA stars playing tight end in the NFL? Let's break it down. It is the Will Cain Show, streaming live Monday through Thursday, 12 o'clock Eastern Time, foxnews.com, Fox News YouTube, Fox News Facebook, and always on demand to listen on Apple or on Spotify. Just hit subscribe, or you can watch the Will Cain Show by subscribing on YouTube. This is our Friday edition of Cain on Sports. I want to talk about that hypothetical introduced by Austin Rivers. Who can more easily transition into the other's league, NFL or NBA stars? Plus, let's talk about what does everyone want me to talk about at this time of year. There's no LeBron. There's very little NFL. So what actually moves the needle in sports talk? Plus, did you know there are teams in Live? Neither did I. We're going to break all this down with the guys from Hot Mic, Jonathan Hutton and Chad Withrow, right here on the Will Cain Show. The hosts of Hot Mic, Jonathan Hutton and Chad Withrow, here on the Will Cain Show. What's up, fellas?
Will, good to see you, man. Hope things are well.
Great to be back on, Will. A lot of stuff going on, so we can't wait to get into it.
Yeah, I'm glad to have you guys back. Let's start with the debate that, sports is in a weird place. And I told my guys, I'm not getting much sleep. I'm watching a ton of sports. I'm watching the Stars and the Mavericks, and I happen to like soccer. So I'm watching a lot of sports right now, and baseball a little bit already. But none of those things lend themselves to national sports talk. If you do sports talk and you want to appeal to a broad audience, I learned this when I was at ESPN. This time of year is about LeBron James. And you could do some Golden State Warriors during their dynastic run. But you don't have either of those anymore. So I don't even know what the boys over at ESPN are doing. I don't know what you guys are doing at Hot Mic. Like, this is when you go, but nobody wants to hear my take on Luka.
Here's the deal, though. Sports fans, they want their top 40 radio. Chad and I discuss this all the time. We'll see if you agree. Sports talk radio, sports talk discussion, no different than turning on and listening to your top 40 in the country. Let's just say, I don't know who has the number one hit. You guys know who has the number one hit?
Probably Taylor Swift. I don't know, but probably.
You're tuning in to hear Taylor Swift on the hour every hour. You'll stick around if you hear Kesha, but you know that Taylor Swift is still coming back around, and you're going to hear Taylor Swift again. That's football.
Yeah.
That's the NFL, and that's
right.
The SEC and the Big Ten, Chad. I mean, you talk football every day and then work in everything else.
Yeah, and I think you're right, Will, though. You don't want to get in the weeds of being very specific about the Mavs game or the Stars game or even the New York Rangers game. But when Pat Beverly chucks a basketball off a woman's head and then fires another basketball off another fan, everybody can talk about that, right?
Yeah.
When there's any type of controversial moment within an individual game, we're going to be talking about it. Jamal Murray throwing a towel and then throwing a heating pad onto the court during an NBA playoff game. That lends itself to some fascinating discussion about the NBA, their players, the lack of respect for their own fans, lack of respect for the game itself at times. So we get into a lot of those things. But, in the idea of playing the hits the way you would at a top 40 station, I think right now, NIL and college sports, NBA, whether even you're talking about specific series, whether or not it's a viable product right now with their television rights coming up and a lot of different people bidding on them, there's still plenty to talk about. But you are right. You got to focus in on whatever that LeBron James was when you're hosting daily sports talk radio, Will. Whatever that topic is, you got to be laser focused on it at times.
I mean, people used to always say, why do you guys always talk about the same thing? And it's not just NFL, by the way. It is quarterbacks, and it's the Dallas Cowboys. So you like the Taylor Swift, the top 40 of sports talk is the Dallas Cowboys, any kind of quarterback debate competition. It is cultural issues, to your point. You can kind of do the stuff around the game, but that's not really talking about the game. And it was LeBron. And it just kind of highlights how important LeBron is to that league. I mean, there was a moment when it's like, okay, will Kevin Durant be the centerpiece of a conversation? He's not anymore. And if you look at the young guys that are studs, And they're legit amazing basketball players. Like, for me, I'm such a Dallas guy that Luka feels that way to me, but I recognize he's not that for the greater national audience. But think about this. It could be like Wolves and Thunder. Like, Anthony Edwards is amazing. Like, he is really good, and maybe eyes are going to get open to him this year. But he's not a national conversation piece. Maybe the Boston Celtics can be in a way. I don't know. But to me, it underlines how important LeBron has been for 2 decades to that league at a time when, what you just bring up, their sports rights are up. I mean, it looks like ESPN and Amazon are getting a piece, and it's between TNT and NBC for that third piece, which means it could be the end of Inside the NBA with, Chuck and Kenny and Ernie and Shaq if TNT doesn't get it. But NBA desperately needs its new LeBron.
Everyone's over the age of 35 right now. That would be the next guy, right, Chad?
Yeah.
Steph Curry, Kevin Durant, the younger pieces. It's interesting because the small markets, there is no real small market in the NFL. You can have Patrick Mahomes in Kansas City. You can have Josh Allen in Buffalo. Giannis in Milwaukee does what for the league? I mean, he's a massive name. He's a star. But he's not the next guy. I don't view him in the same sentence as I do Durant and Steph Curry, but those aren't the faces of the NBA either.
And they're not American. I mean, I do think that we still have, a bit of an issue with that in terms of becoming an American sports sensation.
Yeah.
And that's not to say that Americans, hate foreigners or they hate Luka because he's not from here or Joker because he's not from here. I don't think that's true at all. I think most American basketball fans love and appreciate those guys and their games and the way they play, and they like watching them play.
Yeah.
But I do think, Will, to become a true LeBron James, Michael Jordan, Shaquille O'Neal, Kobe Bryant, Steph Curry level superstar, it's important to be American. And there's not a ton of American superstar talents that are in the running for that right now, outside of maybe Anthony Edwards and what we're watching with his run for Minnesota. If they can go on a run and capture an NBA title and he keeps playing like this, maybe he can be that next guy, but I really don't think so.
Maybe Shea Gilgeous-Alexander, who knows? But, I did a show this week on the Will Cain Show. I talked to this guy from Britain. We talked about culture and, identifying that a culture exists is just an acknowledgement of reality. Like, I love Luka, and Giannis, by the way, is one of my favorite players because he's awesome, but he's a great dude. But I agree with you. Like, he'll never be the face of the NBA there's no language barrier with Giannis and very little with Luka anymore, or with Jokic. But they come in, English is the second language. Their names, Giannis Antetokounmpo, Luka Doncic, Nikola Jokic. It takes a while for Americans to even learn how to pronounce them. I agree with you. It's important that the top star be American, and I actually think that's part of what's hurting baseball. Baseball, we've had Mike Trout and Bryce Harper, but I don't know how many stars are necessary in baseball for it to. That's another underwritten thing. No, baseball doesn't even make the top 40 at all, ever. So for national talk, but I do think that's played a role. The fact that baseball. This is all to the diversity is our strength. Well, not always. It's not actually helping the popularity of baseball in terms of creating stars.
But just look at the marketing campaigns and the faces of that.
Well, and also,
where's Aaron Judge?
It correlates in ratings a lot of times. And baseball is on the way back up with attendance and ratings and everything else. But you hit on a good point there, Will. America was our game. It's America's game. Cooperstown, New York, right? This is our thing. And we handed it over to the world, and they took it and ran with it. And that's not a bad thing for the product of baseball. It's made the game richer. It's made the game better worldwide. But I think it does have a negative effect on having that American superstar. And I would say the same about this. You talked about having a British person on your show. Tim Howard, when he's playing in the EPL, Tim Howard's catching a lot of crap from fans over there because they're saying this American, this Yank, can't be as good as other guys. He plays a certain way. He does certain things a certain way, and that's not our game over here. And I'm fine with that, right? If that's a bigger sport in their country, it's their thing. When a foreigner comes over and suddenly starts playing there, there's going to be questions about their play style. There's going to be questions about their competition when they were growing up playing also. I think a lot of the same things happen with basketball and baseball specifically because it's seen as an American sport first and foremost. Even though these international superstars are terrific for the game, it doesn't mean that's going to translate into a huge box office draw for all American sports fans. And I'm fine with that, just like I'm fine with the Brit who doesn't like the American invading the English Premier League and wanting to be a European superstar all of a sudden as an American playing football in England.
Will, the other thing too, the NFL is just it has better leadership. They look forward. They're forward thinking. The Major League Baseball is in the middle of a crisis with their rights for the television broadcast. NFL will never have that happen. You've got the NBA in negotiations. They're going to be spread out now. And they're a player-run league instead of the ownership all the way down. It looks like the players control all that. Same with the NBA, for that matter. Hey, I'm thinking though, from the NFL's point of view, Chad's right about the American. You're not going to have that. You're not going to have the European twist on whatever American football is, like we've seen right now in basketball. But at the same time, they're just better storytellers. They're better at marketing their individual brands, and those dudes wear face masks. You can't even see them on game day, and you know who they are when they walk down the street. You can't do that with Major League Baseball. They don't embrace it. They don't embrace the social media aspect of it behind the scenes. They didn't like when cameras were on, when individual players were doing blogs in clubhouses. And the NBA is just unlikable. I think that would be the word I would use in many of the cases. You don't know much about the players, but when you do see the headlines, you're not very fond of whatever is the content involved. The NFL is the opposite, and that's where all the marketing dollars are. There, no matter what you're watching, a commercial is involved with their brand, and the other leagues don't have that.
What do you guys think about what Austin Rivers had to say on the Pat McAfee show? Austin Rivers, and this was the big sports debate of this week, Austin Rivers said he could get 30 NBA players to play who could make the NFL, but they couldn't get 30 NFL players who could make the NBA. Now, there's a numbers game that makes it, I almost want to set that aside. Like, the numbers game messes it up. Yeah, there's 53 guys on a roster in the NFL, so there's a lot more opportunities in the NFL. But everybody's kind of crushing him. J.J. Watt's crushing him. Everybody. I actually think Austin Rivers is on to something. Like, the number 30 is kind of what got everybody's attention. But if we take the number and say 10, I think Austin's going to have a lot easier time finding 10 NBA dudes that can play in the NFL than JJ's going to find 10 NFL dudes that can play in the NBA. There's
some dudes that can ball in the NFL, though.
Yeah, I am 1,000,000% in agreement with Austin Rivers. And I think with you on this, Will. I have long said the NBA, they're the best athletic specimens in the world. And these guys could translate and play a number of other sports, right? Not necessarily skill-specific sports. I don't think everybody can go hit a baseball at 97 miles per hour or something like that. But football, I mean, I'll just two examples that come to mind. Could Glenn Big Baby Davis have gone over and played defensive end at his size as a guy who was kind of a middling player in the NBA? Could he go play football? Yeah. Kendrick Perkins, who Charles Barkley just got done making fun of for his playing career, after Kendrick Perkins took shots at Shaq and Charles Barkley, could he have played in the NFL? I think absolutely. And I could go down the list. You know, would LeBron James have been a dynamic tight end, wide receiver in the NFL at, 6'8", 250 pounds with his athleticism? Possibly. I think he could have done that. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, and that's just a number of examples. Yeah, I think the size,
which way do you think this
athleticism ratio would help with the NBA crossing over that way?
Which way does this cut? Which way does the tight end thing cut? So we could rattle off college basketball players that became great NFL players, right? Mostly at the tight end position. Yep. Tony Gonzalez, Antonio Gates, Jeremy Graham. There's more. Jimmy Graham. Yeah. There's more. There's another tight end. But there's. Does that mean, though, that those are NFL players that, had they given more attention to playing basketball through college, could have been NBA players? Or does that show that basketball guys can go become NFL players?
I think it shows that mediocre college basketball players that fit a certain athleticism that also play football or that could play football could go and have a football future as opposed to the other way around. Basketball requires a lot more skill, right? And this is not me demeaning football, because football requires a lot more courage, and there's certainly a lot of skill involved. But if you have the courage within you to go take a hit and to go lay it on the line the way those guys do, I can find you plenty of mid-major power forwards that have the athleticism to go put on pads and give it a shot. And I'm not just talking about tight end. I'm talking about, in some cases, defensive tackles that are really athletic. Could be a defensive end. Could be a pass rusher from a number of spots, right? Slot receiver. Are there some point guards?
I'm a little more hesitant.
That could be slot receivers? I think there are.
Who's going to spin the football?
Well, I'm not
defensive
saying
end and defensive tackle
out of it. I'm just saying they could have that cross.
Well, that's what Austin Rivers is saying, right? Austin Rivers is saying that he could do that. Like you make an entire team.
Well, he said he could do that. Yeah, let's modify what he said. By the way, I don't agree. I think defensive end and defensive tackle are going to be two of the harder positions to fill because of the whole soft versus hard thing. Like, I'm not sure those guys are ready to go line it up on the defensive line. So I'm going to take two positions. If I said to you right now, no, it's hypothetical, but we're going to narrow it in. I want you to find your 5 NBA players that could play tight end versus I want you to take 5 tight ends that you could think could make the NBA. Which transfer of that position alone? And then, by the way, we could do it separately with receiver. Like we could say, all right, I'll take, 5 guards, either point guard or shooting guard. And then you can have Odell and a few other, because I think Odell's probably the most athletic dude I've ever seen. Odell and a few other receivers. Which crossover has more success? Like, stick with tight ends, I think.
Tight end for sure is that's leaning NBA for sure.
I do think
LeBron could play tight end tomorrow.
I think yes. So the tight end comparison's a good one. I could find you 5 NBA players who could be starters in the NFL if they decided to go play football at tight end. Now, I could also find you 5 NFL tight ends that I think could give you good minutes in the NBA, right? They're not going to score a ton of points.
Really?
But I do think it's athletic enough of a position where you could have a crossover where they could go and do something. They could defend someone, they could rebound, they could help you out in some way. Are they going to be stars, though? No. But I think star potential would go to the NBA player crossing over to tight end in the NFL.
I'm thinking of my time, Will, in the locker rooms, and some of the really just bad NFL players were really, really good basketball players. Justin Hunter comes to mind, wide receiver for the Titans. He could ball, and he wasn't tough enough. Like he wouldn't step up and actually block anyone in a run-based scheme. That was his big problem, right? Like that, it doesn't always transfer over, but that was the sport that he was best at, where he ends up being a second-round pick. The other thing, Drake May apparently can straight up hoop too. That was the other the big draft note. Yeah, like I'll take the quarterback that I know can at least play the position. There are other spots too that I don't necessarily think transfer over. Tight end though. That's where the NBA makes their money if they're playing the NFL game.
Drake May had a brother that played at UNC, right? And then he had another brother. I think that's a pitcher. I don't know if he made the majors, but like the 3 brothers. Okay, that takes me to another theory I want to run by you guys. This one is not well fleshed out. This is a baseball theory that I've been watching. So. Baseball for me is like anybody else. I think I could name you the top 10 prospects in the Texas Rangers farm system easier than I could name for you the starting lineup of the Yankees. Like it's very localized for me. And I've been noticing something about the Rangers prospects when it comes to pitching. And I think this is league wide that, at 26, 27 years old, you can't give up on a pitcher. It's kind of fascinating. While every other sport, what they're going to be by really, it's getting younger and younger, right? But baseball pitchers, it's like you don't know, and you got to keep them around at AA, and you got to let them go through a Tommy John surgery or 2. And then after all that time, you actually may end up with an ace, much less a guy in the starting rotation. And it made me think, because my producers told me this, it's been 26 years since Kerry Wood struck out 20 dudes for the Chicago Cubs. And so this theory I've had is like, if you are a pitcher who arrives at like age 20 and you're the early bloomer, you're really only going to last about 4 or 5 years. Like, I don't know the guy who's come in at 20 and we're all celebrated him and he's still there at 32. Meanwhile, the guy that arrives at 26 or 27, I do feel like you get 10 years out of him. I'm just trying to make sense on when is a good time for a pitching prospect to arrive.
Well, and you mentioned Kerry Wood. I mean, think about Mark Pryor as another guy who's very young, right? And kind of peaked very young into his career. Another thing I think about that game, that Kerry Wood game, you're a Texas guy, Will, so you remember this. He struck out 20 Houston Astros in those terrible Astros jerseys. That was like the transition from the old school Astros, where it was like the gray and the navy blue. I'll always remember that. And I don't like those jerseys. I think that a lot of people get paid a lot of money, and no one really has any idea because it's all a unique character base with the pitcher and what's going to matter. To your point, Will, I feel like if you are 6'3" and above and left-handed and can throw 95 plus miles per hour, you're going to have a lengthy Major League Baseball career as a middle reliever. I also feel like I watch a little bit more college baseball now, and every single pitcher in college can throw 95 plus miles per hour, and almost none of those guys are going to have a Major League Baseball career. So both those things can't be true, right? So what is the secret formula for age? Or do you go and play 3 or 4 years in college? Do you go straight to the minor leagues? When's the right time to break someone in the majors? I think it's so non-specific, and that it is very specific to each individual case, that I don't know that we're ever really going to have an answer. It's a great question,
I think,
and it's got me thinking about it. I don't know that there's the right formula per se for how to keep someone around for a long time in the majors.
I think the secret is the older you get, the more you're developing a second and third pitch that you can ace, you can master. You don't necessarily need that in college baseball. Everyone can be Kenny Powers right now in college baseball, right? You have to have that. Tom Glavine said on our show, Chad, he said, where's the guy that can pitch 87 and get the strikeout? That can master the corner.
And can mix speeds and knows exactly where to throw it at 87.
That's way different from the Braves pitching staff of that era with Maddox and Steve Avery and all, compared to what we're seeing across baseball now. I don't know who's really got the second or third pitch that they're truly confident in when the count is set up for that specific pitch. I think the older you get, the more you develop that in the minors.
Yeah, but think about that as a career choice. So I don't know if you guys have been around minor league baseball. I covered it, weirdly. I covered it at ESPN. I did this whole story on the Biloxi Shuckers because they were homeless for like 2 months, never had a stadium. So they had to play every game was a road game. So that was one of the first things I did at ESPN. And, but you can imagine even if it was your own son, or you might have had buddies who gave it a shot, right? Whereas in minor league baseball. And there's a time when it's like, hey, man, I don't think it's going to happen for you. Might be time to get on with life, right? Like he's 25, 26, and you make nothing in the minors, nothing. And you're living a rough life and you're still chasing the dream. But I position that against one of my favorite books as I read the biography of R.A. Dickey. I was just inspired by R.A. Dickey. You guys remember him? Knuckleballer.
He's here next to
he did not break through. Oh, does he live there? Yeah. Mm-hmm. He went to Tennessee, right? Yeah. Yep. Rangers drafted him, and he was kind of a bust. But, and I say that complimentary because he chased the dream and didn't break through until he was 34. Now, in that time, he decided to become a knuckleballer, and he had to start over and learn how to throw a knuckleball. And then he got the $50 million contract at age 37. So it's an awesome story of chase it, and it finally came through, late bloomer. But on the other hand, mom, dad's probably it might be time to get that insurance job.
Well, I love the R.A. Dickey example. And I did a speaking engagement with him last year, in fact, and he was telling his story. And he talked about the amount of pitches he threw at the University of Tennessee in a College World Series season, and how he was a hard-throwing righty, gets to the Rangers organization, and at some point they do a full physical of him, and they decide, hey, you really don't have an elbow. Whatever the injury was, at the time you got nothing left.
I remember that.
There's nothing you can do. And he said, this was not my intent, but I had to pivot, right? If I was going to do anything, it wasn't really to sit. This is what I had to do to have a career, to learn the knuckleball. But I think of that R.A. Dickey example, and the more you watch Major League Baseball now, the more I see and hear the story of the guy who they thought was going to be a starter. He's a top 2 or 3 round pick of an organization, but he gets there and he becomes a great 8th inning guy for the team. And then he has a career as an 8th inning guy, a guy they thought was just a hard throwing closer that didn't have enough pitches. But then he becomes a starter, and he's the 5th starter on a team and slowly works his way up. There are more stories like that, not as extreme because of injury as R.A. Dickey and not as extreme as a knuckleballer. But I do feel like we're starting to see more of those stories where an organization thinks one thing,
I do too,
and then someone adjusts and they become something totally different.
I'm still thinking about the WNBA and how great they have it traveling compared to minor league baseball or the Arena Football League with their traveling commercial.
Yeah.
At least they get to fly.
It's not a bus.
No, it's not a bus.
It's not the Cleveland Indians bus from the movie Major League.
No,
they have to
no,
go
it's
on.
not.
Hey, did you guys watch the Tom Brady roast?
Yes, we did.
Well, I got through some of it.
Yeah.
I think it was a long
Everybody's
roast.
saying yes. 3 hours. You know what my current obsession has been ever since the Tom Brady roast? Is following plastic surgeons on social media, figuring out what all these dudes are doing. Now, when I say all these dudes, there was 2 that caught my attention: Brady and Ben Affleck, and they're doing some things. It's pretty clear. They're doing, and then, hey, I guess more power to them. They look. Brady looks
Brady
amazing, but
What has he had done?
Okay, so you want me to tell you what the internet says? What the plastic surgeons on
I'm curious.
Instagram say? Hair transplant. Then you do something where I can't remember. I think I can't remember if you inject filler or take out to make your cheekbones come out more.
Yeah.
And then you inject something. I think it's an injection. I don't know if it's injection or surgery. Jawline. So it just makes everything real angular and tight, under the carriage and on the jawline and smooth. And I'm telling you, just like a couple years ago, I was like, I had a doctor tell me, you have no idea how many dudes walking around South Beach are on HGH, like just for vanity. I think we're going to have to get prepared. There's a lot of dudes walking around with some face enhancements that we're not capable of keeping up with.
So Tom Brady, who claims that he's never had a sip of coffee in his life, is injecting filler into his teeth.
I absolutely believe he's doing that. All the jokes, too, about him,
there's nothing to believe. Come on.
Yeah, he's doing it for sure.
Yeah, Jonathan, are you saying he's not?
No, I'm not saying he's not. This whole TB12 thing, and then he's, all of a sudden just injecting filler into his cheekbones and then doing something else with his jawline is just ridiculous compared to not having coffee for your entire life.
What was the joke that he looks like a Ken doll that was microwaved at some point? That's what Tom Brady looks like now. He's definitely doing something. It's like Nip Tuck, that old show, NFL edition.
He's got to get ready for fun.
When you look at Tom Brady, I think the hair thing is one. Certainly something with the eyes is going on with Tom Brady. The cheekbones, absolutely. And I look at Ben Affleck, and the new technology where they can almost put a filter on your face every time you're on camera. Apple TV shows are very good at doing this. My wife and I are watching a show with Kristen Wiig in it. I don't know that that's Kristen Wiig all the time, or they've got like some sort of filter over her face, like the de-aging technology they put on Harrison Ford in the latest Indiana Jones movie, that makes them look different, shinier. I don't even know if it's younger. It's just like a shine to their face that doesn't look real.
Angelic.
And this is every character on this show. And I could name some other Apple TV shows that I'm convinced every character has some sort of filler on their face that the camera does. That's what Ben Affleck looks like just normally. Like without some sort of camera trick, it looks like someone with plastic surgery put that type of effect on his face.
Look at how great Will looks. He's got the filter on right now.
Yeah,
you can tell.
Definitely some cheekbone implants on Will is what I'm sensing.
Oh, I'm working on it. I'm getting the jaw done next. By the way, Tom, if you're listening, you look amazing. Liv, last topic I wanted to talk about you guys with. So this is the headline at ESPN. Liv Golf introduces trade window to allow teams to swap players. Okay. I guess I kind of knew that they did team golf in Liv, but I didn't really know. So I don't know if you guys are golf fans, but there are teams. Listen to the names of these teams. Bryson DeChambeau's team is the Crushers GC. John Rahm's is Legion 13. Ripper GC led by Cameron Smith. Ironheads GC, captained by Kevin Na. I'm not a golf fan like enough to know this is what's going on in Live.
I can't think of anything where there's been such an investment, so much money spent on something that has produced such little actual on-field, on-course, on-court interest in the history of sport.
Well, they're gonna take over.
The off the course intrigue is there, but actual on course intrigue about these tournaments and the team aspect of golf, that's the Crushers is the one that I've heard that you just mentioned. Will, I've not heard of a single other team in Live.
Well, I mean,
Yeah.
I think they're just sitting back. I mean, they haven't had the success, but they're going to own golf because they're just sitting back waiting on the PGA to not have a deal. According to Dan Rappaport, you've got Patrick Cantley, who's calling the shots for the PGA Tour. You've got Jimmy Dunn and Ed Hurley, who negotiated that June 6th agreement, who haven't been involved in any negotiations since then. And Rory McIlroy, who was open to coming back onto the Players Policy Board, is now saying he's not. And that was right after he was apparently offered, $800 million. The whole thing is a mess. And meanwhile, Liv is just sitting back, giving all these you got teams that you're just. I think they just handpick players that they want to own the team as part of their.
It's
their
part
contract.
of their offer. The hundreds of billions of dollars they're giving them. You also get a team in your name.
Yeah,
I guess they choose.
LeBron would love this, right?
Who cares about? Do people care? Do they care if the Crushers beat the Ironheads?
Well, why do the players care? That was the other thing. Like, why is this a part of that negotiation? There's clearly something there.
I don't know. I think the players, I think if you're going to get that much money, they care about the money. So they're going to take the check and the money. And then it's like, oh, you also get to have your own team. I guess you're thinking, cool. Might as well do it in case it takes off. But to answer your question, Will, no one cares about the Crushers and the Ironhead. I've not had a single person ask me on the street, did you see the score between the Crushers and the Ironheads this past weekend in that Live event? That was on
I'm going to start
UPN
doing that.
Is now, or is it still UPN or whatever network they cut a deal with?
C-Dub.
It is the least successful money-driven venture I've seen. But the crazy thing is, it does not matter because the money that it's coming from, it's endless. So all they're doing is flooding the market with money in a non-successful venture in order to bankrupt the PGA and force the PGA to merge with them.
Well,
because they're going to have to.
I don't think they want to merge anymore.
I think they want to own it.
Collapse internally, and they'll end up.
Don't want to collapse it.
And the scary thing is, what sport is next? Right, that's what I keep coming to. What American sport is next that they could pull this off with? That's what
American
me.
Sport?
Yep. Tennis.
It will be harder.
American sport.
So I just know because I'm a soccer. Well, this is where. So I only know this because I'm a big soccer fan, right? So I've seen what they've done in other sports, what they've done in soccer, and the MO has been to go in and buy teams, right? So they own Paris Saint-Germain, they own Manchester. When I say they, the Middle Eastern oil countries, right? And it's not all Saudi Arabia. They just bought their first in Newcastle. It's the UAE. It's Qatar. And they own Newcastle and Manchester, they being the Middle Eastern countries, PSG and Manchester City. And then they invest a ton of money into them. And they get really good. All the teams are, But they can't do that in America as easily because of the thing that, I don't know how we feel about it, because of the salary cap. Like, you'd be limited on what you could do. Like, they could buy the Oklahoma City Thunder, right? But you can't. That's a bad example because they're good anyway. But you could buy whoever, the Orlando Magic, but you're not going to be able to flood them with money because there's a salary cap. I guess soft cap sports, you could pay the taxes. I don't care. I'll pay the taxes and make those teams great. I think they're somewhat limited in what they can do in America.
Well, at some point, though, the NFL is going to be a part of this. How many people on the planet have over $10 billion? I know who does, and I know what area of the world they're in. You've got $10 billion was the offer for the Miami Dolphins. Like, at some point, what's the value of an NFL franchise if the wealthiest people on the planet can't bid on it? To me, that's the next venture. And I'm not naive enough to think that we won't see a preseason game there at some point.
And to your point, Will, you're right about the salary cap structure in American professional sports preventing that type of European soccer team takeover and making them good. What I fear is a scenario where they do what they did to the PGA and they go and offer every great basketball player a bunch more money to go play in a different league that they own. And that would basically hold the NBA hostage because now we have all of your players not playing in your league and playing in ours,
right?
Forcing them to the negotiating table. And now all of a sudden, Adam Silver is having to deal with the private investment fund and have some sort of merger where they now own 40% of the NBA. And then now you can have your players back and your NBA back. And oh, by the way, 5 years from now, we're going to own 80% of the NBA. And before we know it, Saudi Arabia owns the NBA.
And it's not just about owning one team or whatever. Chad's right. I mean, it's more about once they're in, it's their influence, right? That the direction of said league. I don't even know if it's about spending money to win as much as it is getting your foot in the door and then influencing everyone else.
Yeah, that's a really interesting scenario. I mean, part of me is like, I saw something the other day where somebody projected that a NBA player will be making $100 million in the next couple of years, $100 million a year. The money's getting so absurd. And so I was thinking about that, Chad, when you're describing that. But I mean, they were offering those soccer guys, some of those soccer guys, like I think the offer to Messi was hundreds of millions of dollars a year to come play there, which he turned down to come own part of Miami in MLS. So yeah, I mean they can come over the top no matter how big the salaries get in America. They can come over the top. Well, my takeaway from our conversation today is my family's already like a little out on me because my mood, it was among the most immature things that I do. You know, I wake up like this morning after the Stars and the Mavericks lose, and my mood is impacted. That I'm still immature. I'm like that. That's the way it is. So I'm gonna just go ahead and push it over the top. And next time they ask me why I'm upset, I'm gonna be like, the Crushers got killed by the Ironheads. You know, I'm gonna take on a golf team just to.
They're going to think they're going to be surprised by that and probably think that you're a degenerate gambler now if you're that upset about the Crushers' loss that you have some money on that one because there's no way they're going to buy that you actually cared about the live results.
How are we going to feel when kids begin mentioning the Crushers and Ironheads and we don't know what they're talking about, Chad?
I don't know. If we get there,
I'm getting gear.
Yeah, We'll find out. I've got an almost 9-year-old right now. Maybe she'll be a huge Crushers fan one day. Who knows?
Yeah, we should get gear. I definitely want that gear. I want that shirt.
They're coming to Nashville.
What kind of merch do they have in Live?
Maybe we'll load up on gear, Chad. We'll send Will some.
All right, awesome. Hot mic, Chad Withrow, Jonathan Hutton. Always great to have you here on the Will Cain Show. Thanks, fellas.
Thank you, Will.
There you go. I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Jonathan Hutton and Chad Withrow of Hot Mic. Check them out on Outkick.com. I will see you again next time.